My uncle has put my grandmother in a care home and is selling her house. Will that stop me inheriting my late father's share? By This Is Money published, 12/12 British Summer Time, the 5th of August 2019, updated, 12/12 British Summer Time, the 5th of August 2019. My grandfather died earlier this year, leaving some money in his house to his wife, my grandmother. She is in her 80s and becoming frail. My aunt and uncle decided to move her into a time care home a few weeks ago, and they have since put the house on the market. I am worried about this, partly because I'm not sure my grandmother should go into care, and also because my sister and I are supposed to inherit at some point in the future. My father was one of 3 children, however, he passed away last year. As far as I know, my grandparents, his parents, had left the house to their 3 children in equal measure, and my father told us that this meant his share would come to me and my sister. The law requires that individuals use their own wealth to pay care fees first. Stock image. I'm not sure what happens if my aunt and uncle sell it before my grandmother dies. We don't have a great relationship with that side of the family, and it's not easy to talk openly about this with my aunt and uncle, especially as we don't know what we should be entitled to. What should we do, and is our father's inheritance protected? Mike Mustin, associate in the dedicated contested wills, trusts and inheritance disputes team at Royds Whitby King, replies, trying to understand what may happen to the assets of relatives who move into care and what impact this may have upon the future inheritance of family members is a fairly common and understandable concern. There may not be a great deal that can be achieved in terms of protecting inheritance when it comes to care fees, but having some knowledge of your legal position is likely to provide some peace of mind, particularly in circumstances where family members often feel uncomfortable talking openly about such matters. It would seem from your question that your aunt and uncle are taking the lead on assisting your grandmother. This would seem usual as her children and possibly also as her attorneys. Mike Mustin, associate, Royds Whitby King. If your grandmother's assets consist primarily of her home, it may well be sensible, necessary for her home to be sold in order to fund her care costs. The technical process involved with selling the property will depend upon whether your grandmother is deemed to have the necessary mental capacity to give instructions for the sale. If not, and if your aunt and uncle have indeed been validly appointed as your grandmother's attorneys under a lasting or enduring power of attorney, they could sell the property on her behalf, if it is in her best interests to do so. If they are not attorneys and your grandmother lacked capacity to make the decision herself, it would be necessary to make an application to the Court of Protection. In terms of how the current circumstances may affect your inheritance, I suggest there are 2 main issues to consider. 1. What does your grandmother's will say? 2. How will care fees impact upon your grandmother's wealth? It would appear that you have not seen a copy of your grandmother's will, so you do not know for certain what her wishes may have been. Your grandmother's will may be in similar terms to one made by your grandfather, and, where probate is obtained, wills are often available upon request from the probate registry. However, if the main family assets were a jointly owned property and joint bank accounts, there is a fairly good chance that probate would not be required in your grandfather's estate, so the will would not be publicly available. In any event, if your grandmother had the necessary mental capacity, you could not rule out the possibility that she has made a more recent will, dividing her estate differently, or even that she may choose to make a further will in the future. It may therefore be the case that, unfortunately, unless your aunt and uncle have access to a copy of the will and are willing to share this with you, you may not know of its content until after your grandmother's death. Will you still inherit? In terms of inheritance, if the will is along the lines of what your father mentioned to you, what you receive may depend upon whether the gift from your father was just in terms of a share of the house or the whole estate. If merely a share of the house, there is a risk that the sale of the house could mean it is no longer possible for that gift to pass on to you and your sister on your grandmother's death, as the house would no longer be part of your grandmother's estate, and the proceeds of sale are not treated as the same thing. However, if instead, or in addition, you are to receive your father's 1/3 share of the estate, this will be less of an issue, as you would simply be able to share 1/3 of whatever remains on your grandmother's death, which may include any proceeds of sale. If you believe there is serious concern, you should contact the Office of the Public Guardian, which monitors the actions of attorneys as for what monies may remain. As mentioned, there is often very little that can be done to protect against the need for care fees to be paid until a person's funds dip below £23,250. Indeed, there are strict rules which enable local authorities to recover money in situations of deprivation of assets, i.e., a person giving away money to avoid having to pay care fees. Occasionally, if a person's care needs are sufficiently serious, they might be entitled to receive continuing health care funding from the state, but such funding is becoming increasingly rare. Another concern you may have is that, given the difficult relationship between the family, you may feel uncomfortable with your aunt and uncle being responsible for dealing with your grandmother's affairs, without input from you. Whilst you have not suggested that your aunt and uncle would act irresponsibly, if they are appointed as attorneys or deputies, they are required to act in the best interests of your grandmother. Unfortunately, there are times where concerns arise as to whether those responsible may in fact be spending money for their own personal benefit. Whilst such issues will not affect you, if you believe there is serious concern, you should contact the Office of the Public Guardian, which monitors the actions of attorneys and deputies in such cases. This is Money's 5 of the best protection insurance deals. Toggle search I want to find. Let's block ads. Why?